Okay, thanks a lot, Ken, for the introduction. As Ken said, I was also a product of Prairie Swine Center. So I did my postdoc a few years ago, and after going around a little bit, I decided to settle at the Prairie Swine Center to work as a scientist there. Can you hear me loudly now? Okay. Yeah, so
You want to take the other mic?
yeah. So as Ken said, yeah. So today what I'll be talking really about is what the literature is saying about creep feed, why there's a lot of variations, right, in the results that we get with creep feeding. And then also what we at the Prairie Swine Center have done in terms of creep feeding for the past few years. So this is the past 5 years. And then also some take-home messages for you all. So this presentation will follow this outline. So first of all, I'll start by talking about some of the reasons why people will maybe provide creep feed in the farrowing rooms, reasons why there's some variations in the literature, right? And also what we see on farm. And then, like I said, I will share some of the information that we've really generated for the past few years. So what our research is showing. So here I will talk about 2 very recent research. But currently, we are also working on a PhD project where we are looking at different creep feeding strategies. So I would share some results for the first activity that we currently is ongoing, but some of the results. And then, of course, what I really hope here is some take-home messages. So what you can really take back to your barns if you are creep feeding. So before we start, So before we start, I wanted us to do some activity, but it looks like I can't find the QR code on the slide. Ken? Something is missing here, the QR code.
I deleted it because it doesn't.
Oh no. Okay, yeah, anyway. So you can also text AKA 817 to
Just go to the poll everywhere.
the poll over, okay? I go back. Yeah, so you can also text that 817 to that code, and then you can see some responses there, or some questions that you have to respond to. So maybe I'll just give you a few, let me say 1 minute, 2 minutes to text. So the first question is, do you use creep feed? So there's a couple of responses. Yes, I always use creep feed. Yes, I sometimes use creep feed. No, but I've used creep feed in the past. And the last one is no, I've never used creep feed. So I guess the overall response looks like some people are providing creep feed in some form. So I'll go to the next question. So the next question is, why do you provide creep feed? And here you have up to 6 responses that you can choose from. Yeah, so it looks like for the second question, most people are providing crib feed because they want to familiarize their piglets to feed before weaning. Maybe just 10%. I don't know the number of people who responded 10, but it looks like also if you have large litters, then that could also be the reason why they were providing crib feed. So the third question is, does providing crib feed work for your operation? So like, is it really working for you? And here, up to what, 7 responses that you can choose from. It stopped working? Shouldn't. Okay. Yeah, it should work now. Oh, it's not working? Okay. So I guess the last question is, how do you measure the performance? So here you have to text, like maybe, just check intake, uniformity. Like, how do you measure it? Is it the Okay, so I guess it's also having the same problem. So is there someone here who wants to maybe raise their hands and tell us how they measure the performance of crib feeding in the operation? Yeah.
We really don't know.
Right.
Unless you weigh your pigs.
Right. Okay. Any other responses?
If you get the pig, depending on your weaning age, of course, you get the piglet used to the dry feed and weaning. Absolutely, your growth those first week, 10 days is going to be higher. Well, out the nurse, it's
Right.
going to be higher,
Mm-hmm.
and depending on weaning, your star lines or potential star lines are going to be less if that piglet knows anything about the tree, is eating a little tree.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I now have 2 responses here, which I think is really nice. So one is about the transitioning and how easy it is for the piglets to be able to, perform once you wean them. So in terms of the growth, and then yeah. But so I'll just move back to. Yeah, and so when we look at crib feeding, right, the first thing that most people will consider, especially when you look at the literature, is the fact that they look at the modern genetics, right? There's a lot, the sows are really producing a lot of piglets, but they're also nursing a lot of piglets. So this has created some demands in the lactation period. So there's demand for milk. There's also competition by those piglets for the milk. So this tends to cause issues with growth for some of the piglets that are not able to get the milk. And then this is what also causes some variations in the body weight, right? The uniformity issues that we currently have. But of course, also because of the fact that some of them are not getting milk, they tend to be hungry, and then some of them can also die. So this is one of the reasons why in the literature they will say, okay, maybe the increase in piglet mortality before weaning could also be to the fact that some of them are hungry. And so when you look at all these factors, right, like the demand on the sows, the pressure on the sows to milk, to maybe nurse those piglets, and also the pressure on the piglets to be able to get enough milk, this is one of the reasons why crib feeding is a potential tool in the farrowing rooms. But then when you look at also the reasons why people will provide crib feed throughout the literature, and I think we also saw some examples here when we were looking at the responses, the reasons why we also do it on farm. So the first one would be the fact that it's, maybe they have large litters. So here there's also low milk production for those piglets, right? The second one will be helping maybe the smaller piglets or the compromised ones to be able to grow well. Of course, also in some late finishing systems, like in systems where they are winning like around 28 days, and maybe in Europe where some can win maybe around like 35 days, they also provide some crib feed. It can be the reason why they want to provide crib feed in the nursery, in the farrowing rooms, to help the piglets to be able to get enough feed to be able to supplement whatever the sow is giving them. And of course, I think that's the most popular one, was trying to familiarize the piglets with their feed, dry feed, before they are weaned, right? And so when you look at all these different reasons why people will provide crib feed, then it becomes very obvious the reason why there can be some variations, right? Like, I think you did mention that you look at the transition and how it's easy for them to transition. Somebody else will look at trying to reduce pre-weaning mortality. That's the reason why they'll provide crib feed. Somebody will be like, okay, I want to look at growth. So there's different reasons. So when different reasons, then they have come together different results, right? But then when you go further to look at some of the reasons why maybe there's a lot of variations in the literature, so for some of the variations, we have described them in the crib feed handbook that we have for you. But when you look at the literature, the variations that they were able to capture was 65% of the variation, around 65. And so here there were three major contributing factors to this variation. So this is the performance of the piglet. So this has to do with the growth and all, which obviously is influenced by the litter size, but also the weaning age. Like, how long are you keeping them in the farrowing rooms? And then when you look at the crib itself, it has to do with the duration and then the timing, right? Like, when are you introducing the crib feed? And for how long are you introducing the crib feed? So these are some of the reasons why there could be variation. And then when it comes to also the intake, of course, if the piglets are not eating the crib feed, then there's not going to be any response, right? So when you look at all this, then it becomes very clear that trying to look at the benefits it's not really that guaranteed unless you're able to, you could say, satisfy certain conditions, right? And so when you also look at, say, the crib feed intake, when you look at all the published work that has been done in North America, Europe, and around the world, one thing that the three main conclusions. The first conclusion is the fact that there's a lot of variation in all the research that has been done in terms of the response on crib feed intake. The second thing you will see is that if you look at even this graph, right, you will see that intake of the crib feed is very low from the start. Then around, say, 2 weeks of age, that's when you see crib feed intake increasing from the literature. So if you look at the middle one, this is what is predicting the intake, right? But as the crib feed intake increases, so does the variation, right? So if you look at these two lines, dotted lines that are trying to capture the confidence interval of the variation, you can see that, and this represents crib feed intake for each of the studies that reported on crib feed intake. You can see that as it's increasing, so is the variation around crib feed intake. So it's very, very variable when you look at crib feed intake and all. And I think that's something you would have also maybe noticed in your farm too. And so when you try to look at the conclusions from the literature to come up with best practices, right, on how to maybe encourage crib feed intake to maybe increase the responses you're trying to capture, the first thing that they'll really talk about is early exploration, right? You have to give them the crib feed as early as possible. In the literature, the conclusion is that you want to offer them crib feed a minimum of 14 days before they are weaned. So I guess what this translates into is that for a 28-day farrowing, then it has to be maybe around day 14, but if it's 21, then you have to start very early, day 7. But what is also very important here is the fact that you want to do it as frequently as possible. So you want to be giving them very fresh feed, otherwise they will not eat. And I know this is something that can also be very tough to do on farm because it also has to do with the labor. So that maybe, I guess, one of the easiest way to do is introduce them to the crib feed very small amounts. So the first day, you can give around like 100 grams to see how they will interact with the crib feed and consume it. And then with that, you can increase over the days that you introduce the crib feed instead of trying to give them everything at the same time. And then it's going to be there for the whole day. It's not fresh and all, right? So that's not going to encourage them to interact with the crib feed or eat the crib feed. But what is also becoming very clear with the current research is that maybe we should look at crib feed not from the traditional way, where the idea was it needs to be, we have to make sure that it's palatable, and then this will allow them to eat more of the crib feed. The current thinking is that maybe we should be using some approach where we have to look at the form of the crib feed. And most of the research is indicating that pellet size is very important. Like if you give them larger pellets, they tend to eat that a lot. And last week at Saskatchewan, when we have the talk, I had a producer come in to tell me, yeah, they tried pellets, and they seems to really enjoy the pellets a lot. That's something they've also noticed. And this is something that's also captured in the literature. And then the other one is simplicity versus complexity, right? Because here, most of the time, people who are using like very complex script, a lot of add maybe ingredients and other stuff just to encourage intake, but also very highly digestible ingredients and all. Some of the newer information is indicating that maybe we should a simple crib feed can work in terms of encouraging intake and also maybe promoting performance, right? For Prairie swine, what we have tested is trying to just give them the lactation feed or the first nursery feed. And I will show you the results from those studies a couple of slides from now. But what is also very clear is that maybe the reason why we don't capture, we are not able to see a lot of maybe more benefits, and there's a lot of variation, is we're not able to look at other matrices, right? We're not looking at the non-growth or non-performance or non-productive matrices. So something like gut health development, the robustness of the piglet, the resilience of the piglet. Because that's what the newer, the information that is coming, that's what it's trying to tell us. And that's something we're also learning about, and that's also some of the research that we are also working on at the Prairie Swine Center. So what I'm going to do with the next couple of slides is to try to talk to you or walk you through the research, two research that we've done in the past 5 years, and the current project that we're working on in terms of crib feeding. So for the first research or the first study, we were trying to look at, the question was, does complexity really pay off? If you give them a very complex crib versus a very simple crib, what is the benefit of those different cribs, right? And so here we're looking at what is the effect on the pre-weaning performance, but also the performance during the nursery period. So we had 4 treatments. We had a treatment where they didn't have any crib, and then we had a treatment which had the simple crib. So this was just providing them the sow lactation diet. And then we had another group where they had the first nursery feed as the crib. And then we had the last treatment, which is treatment number 4. So that for that group, we had 2 feeders in those crates. And then we had provided just the simple crib in one feeder and then the complex crib in the other feeder to see how, the difference in the preferences for those 2 different cribs, if it's provided at the same time. And so this crib was provided from day 14 up until weaning. And so when we look at the results for the crib feed consumption as well as the preferences, right, we did not really see any real differences in terms of the consumption of the simple crib and then the complex crib. And also, but what you can also see here is when the group that had both were eating slightly more, but there were not real differences. The differences were not significant. And then also when we look at the group where they also had the 2 crib provided to them, we do not see any differences in terms of the preferences. It didn't look like they preferred the simple crib, which is the lactation feed, or the nursery feed, which was the complex feed for this trial. And then when we look at the growth, of the piglets before weaning, one thing we saw was that those that were provided the sow lactation feed, which is the orange bar, for the last week before weaning, right, they tended to, they had a slightly better growth compared to the rest. But overall, there was not really any, because the difference was very limited, because there was the overall, in terms of the body weight at weaning, only like a trend, so it wasn't really significant. And then when we look at the post-weaning performance, one thing we saw was that it was only the first week after weaning where those that did not have any crib, they grew like very slow compared to the other group. But when you look at the entire nursery, there was no differences in the performance. So yeah, that's what it's trying to tell us. So the kind of conclusions we drew from this study was that, one, providing crib feed really improved growth just around the weaning. So this is the first week before and after weaning. That's where we saw the benefits of the crib. We didn't see any long-term benefits of providing crib in this study. So at the end of the nursery, we did not see any differences. And we also did not see any advantage of using a very expensive complex crib feed in this study. So then the take-home message here is a simple crib is enough if you are providing crib for this study. That's the conclusion we drew from this study. And so for the second research, what we're looking at was the crib form. Because when you look at the literature, people are saying maybe the piglets prefer the larger pellets, right? So here what we're also looking at was what will be the effect of different crib form on the performance of the animal. But we also look at iron status, just because when you provide these large pellets, most of the time you use very fibrous ingredients. And fibrous ingredients, they tend to have higher iron levels. So then the idea is that if there's any piglet that prefers the large pellets and is also anemic, then maybe they might benefit from that, right? So that's the reason why we look at growth and also iron status with this study. So we have 4 treatments. We had treatment where there was no crib, and then we had the standard crib. So this will be the cribs that we produced, we used in those studies. So this will be the standard crib. So this is just crumbles. And then this was the large pellets that we use. So this is, so these are horse crunchies. That's what we tested in this trial, just to see how big we can go, right, for this study. And of course, in the pilot study, they really prefer this and that. Those were the forms that they prefer. So that's why we selected these ones to look at them very, very carefully in the main study. And then we had the 4th group where they had a mixture of this to see whether with the preferences and all. So here we introduced the crib on day 10 up until weaning. And we collected blood sample from 1 large pig and 1 small pig within each litter. So this was blood we took a day before weaning. And like I said, these are the crib forms that we use, and this is just based on the initial pilot study, which indicated that they would prefer this type of crib and then this form. Of course, also in the literature, it has also been shown that they prefer like larger cribs, right? So that's why we tested these two in the study that we did. We did not see any differences in performance. So here I only present the results for the iron levels and also the interactions with the crib. So when you look at the interaction with the crib, one thing we saw was that we did it in 2 ways, right? Like, how do they interact with the crib every day? Like when we introduce the crib, like for how long do they interact with the crib? So this is something we measured for the first 60 minutes. And then we also looked at interaction from how were they interacting with the crib from the various days that it was introduced until the end of the end of the nursery farrowing. So one thing we saw was that when we introduced, were exposed to the crib, the initial interaction was higher, but then it did reduce over time. So by 60 minutes, the interaction was lower compared to when it was initially introduced. But in terms of over the period of the introduction, it did generally increase over time, right? So this is telling us that, of course, they need time to be able to get used to the crib feed. And then when we look at the iron status, one thing we saw was that when you compare the large piglets versus the smaller piglets, in terms of the iron level, hemoglobin, and of course hematocrit levels, they were lower in the large pigs compared to the smaller pigs, right? So all the indicators all the parameters that will indicate that they have anemia is something we saw with the large pigs compared with the smaller pigs. So I guess the conclusion here is that maybe the larger pigs, they require more iron than the smaller ones. The demand is higher than the smaller growing pigs. Maybe I can ask the question here. So in terms of iron protocols in the farrowing rooms, is there any 1 year doing the two injections or just one injection? 2 injections? Okay. So which days are you doing those injections post farrowing?
Day 2, we're doing the first one, and then day 5.
Okay.
Second.
Is there anyone else?
Very good question. So what would the weight variance be looking at large pigs versus small pigs? Like how large is the large versus the small is the small? Is that a factor?
Yeah. So I don't know whether should I repeat the question?
Yes.
So the question is, what was the weight between the large and then the smaller pigs? So the large could be around like 8 kilogram at weaning, and then the small could be 4 to 5 kilograms at weaning, as an example. Because this are averages that we took, right? So that would be the differences. Yeah. But then when we look at the different CRIP treatments, right? Like, is there any differences in terms of how the pigs performed? One thing we saw was that the only differences that we could see was just for one parameter, but the rest were not significant. So what this is really telling us is that none of the CRIP form was superior in terms of improving the iron status of the piglets. So for the second study, the conclusions that we drew from the study was that none of the CRIP form was superior in terms of improving growth or the iron levels of those piglets. But the larger pellets, in this trial, we did not see any preferences. But I said for the pilot study, we did see some differences in terms of the preferences. But for the main study, we did not. But what we are trying to do now is use pellets for the rest of the study, because we know that will benefit them. Although the pellets we are using for the PhD project is not as big as this. They are a bit smaller than this. They are around like 6 millimeters. So and this is 4 centimeters. So they are way smaller than these ones. But also the other conclusion is the fact that the large pigs, maybe they need more iron than maybe we think. So like I said, currently what we are doing is this very big PhD project. And for the project, we are trying to look at different creep feeding strategies, right? Like how can we encourage piglets to eat more of the creep? But then we are also trying to capture what is the difference between the benefit of the creep and the strategies for a low birth weight piglet compared to like a normal birth weight piglet. Because I think most of the comments or most of the idea is that the smaller ones are the ones that maybe will be eating the creep in the farrowing rooms and not the bigger one, because they might have access to the teeth and the better teeth and the more milk compared to the smaller ones. So we are trying to see, is it true, and then if there's a case, then what's the differences between those ones, right? But here we're also focusing on a couple of things. We are not only focusing on just the farrowing and the nursery performance. We are looking at the overall robustness of the piglet. So here we are looking at the growth from up until the marketing period. So that's what we are trying to capture here. But we're also looking at gut health indicators. We're looking at gut development. We're looking at immune status. But we're also looking at what is the benefit of all these strategies to the sow, because not so many studies have really looked into what the benefits are for the sow. Because if it's nursing these large piglets, of course, it's also a lot of metabolic demand on the sow, right? So what will be the benefit of these strategies on the piglet, but also the sow, is what we're also trying to capture with this project that we are currently doing. So for the first activity, what we're trying to look at is, so what is the benefit of using different additives, right, in a creep feed? And what will be the benefit for intake of course, the growth of the piglets. So here we're also looking at, like I said, gut health indicators, because it's not really looked at a lot. It's mostly the growth and the intake is what people will really report on. So we are trying to capture all of those other information. But we're also looking at the differences, like I said, between a low birth weight piglet and a normal birth weight piglet. So here, when I say a low birth weight piglet, what I mean is a piglet that is less than 1.2 kilogram at birth, and then a normal birth weight in this trial will be more than 1.5 kilograms. So for the first activity, we had 3 different treatment groups. So for the first treatment group, they had, that's the control. So here we just provided them with just the nursery starter 1. And this was pelleted. Like I said, we've said to stick with pellets because we think that is what the piglets prefer. The second group was just the control, but then we had some prebiotics. This is a canola-based prebiotic that we had in this treatment. And then the last group was just the control, but then we had the prebiotic combined with an oregano-based additive. And the crib feed was introduced from day 14 up until weaning. And so when we looked at the sow performance during the lactation period, there were no differences across the treatment groups. But one of the things we saw was that, so this will be the weight of the sows once they were moved into the farrowing rooms. And then this was the weight, the antibody weight at weaning, at farrowing. And then this is the weight of the sows at weaning. And so what we saw was that the sows, although there were no differences across the treatment, we did see that all the sows gained around 8% body weight. So this translated into around like 19 kilograms of body weight gain in the farrowing rooms. So I guess the simple explanation would be that perhaps the crib feed in this case really helped. It tended to ease the lactation stress on the sows. That's why maybe they were able to reserve some of the body weight losses. But then when we look at crib consumption, there were no differences. But on average, we had 40% of the piglets that really ate the crib feed. So this, of course, also tells us that there's still variations in the crib feed intake. But of course, there's also there's something we're also trying to work on, trying to increase the number of eaters in the subsequent trials. But for this study, it was around 40% that really consumed crib when we try to look at the differences.
So did you take any of this data to the finish part?
To the finishing barn, yeah, we did. But like I said, here I'm only showing you the preliminary results because the experiment is still ongoing. I think the last pigs left the barn maybe 2 weeks ago. So we don't we need to gather all that information. So in the next few years, we will be showing a lot of results from this study, of course, and we'll also be sharing it through our KTT department. So it's going to be out there. So, like I said, for now, we only have information up until the end of the nursery, right? So for this trial, what we saw was that when you look at the variations and also the performance, the main driver was the birth weight for this study, where all the normal weight pigs, the ones with the normal birth weight, they did perform better than the low birth weight up until the end of the nursery. We did not see any differences in trying other additives to the crib on any of the on body weight. But one thing we saw was that there were some interactions between the body weight and also the crib feed supplementation that we provided. And so when we tried to understand what this interaction means, one thing we saw was that, so if you look at the blue lines, right? So the blue lines will represent the low birth weight, and then the orange line will represent the normal birth weight. One thing we saw was that in the group that had a prebiotic added to the crib, the piglets with the low birth weight, they tended to have, the performance was very close to the normal birth weight on that group. So that's what is driving the interactions, right? So this was the first week after weaning up until maybe the second week post-weaning. And so what this is telling us is that perhaps the prebiotic really helped the low birth weight piglets to be able to perform comparably to the ones that had normal birth weight. And I guess one of the things we really learned from this is maybe some of these strategies, they need to be more targeted. It's one of the approaches that maybe we should be thinking going forward. So in terms of the conclusion from the current activities that we are working on, the conclusions are that when adding additives to the crib feed, we did not see any benefit to the in terms of which one was better for sow, improve lactation performance. We did not also see any overall effect of just the additive. But one thing we saw was that the prebiotic was able to help the low birth weight piglets to perform better. So this is the interaction. It's not the main effect. Also, providing the crib feed may help the sows, right, in terms of not losing so much of the body condition. Like I said, this is an ongoing trial. Like I said, we have collected some information up until market. So this is information that we also look at to see what was the benefit in terms of the lifetime performance of the piglets. But then we also took some samples so this to understand what is the benefit to the overall immune status of the piglet, but also the gut development of the piglet. So I guess the key take-home messages for this talk is that crib feed seems to be beneficial to large litters, late weaning systems, right, and then sows under metabolic stress. So here will be sows that are weaning very large litters, but then they're also spending more time in the farrowing room. So this can be where crib feed will be most beneficial. In our studies, what we learned was that a simple, less expensive crib is enough. It can provide the same benefit. So here what we tested was just the lactation feed and then the first nursery feed. But overall, one thing we also thought we need to understand more, and what we think is the best approach is that providing crib feed, you should have to give them a minimum of 14 days before weaning, if we're going to use crib feed and get more benefit out of it. And then we also saw that from the study, crib feed may be beneficial in terms of helping the sows to maintain body condition before weaning. And like I said, we still have some ongoing projects. Here we are trying to understand robustness, gut development, and then so many other parameters, the immune status and all for those piglets. And like Ken said, we do have some crib feed handbooks at the back there. So, and here we've also described so many other factors and so many strategies that you can use in the handbook. So maybe if you can go to the back there, you can grab one of those handbooks and see some of the other strategies that you can also use. The location of the feeder in the crate, and the design of the crate, design of the feeder that is maybe more preferential for those piglets. So here I would like to thank you and welcome any more questions that you have.